The film opens with an award-winning psychiatrist named Dr. Alan Fisher, who seems to be doing just fine in his office. Out of nowhere, he takes the elevator to the rooftop, jumps off the building, and takes his own life. Simultaneously, the framed and hanged certificate on Fisher's office wall fixes itself, indicating the presence of an evil or unseen force. The scenes shift to our second psychiatrist, named Dr. James Martin, who drives to a penitentiary facility to visit a patient of Fisher's who goes by the name Edward Wayne. After going through a lengthy security checkup outside the prison, James is brought inside, where he's asked to hand over his possessions, such as his phone and car keys, momentarily at the reception, due to the prison's strict policy. The prison's warden, Tom Moss, welcomes James and shows him to Edward's cell. On his way, Tom warns James about Edward's highly manipulative and gaslighting skills, which he might use to get James to declare him a clinically insane person to avoid his death sentence after committing nefarious crimes. Tom urges James to come up with an honest evaluation soon because he is to be executed around 11 o'clock. Keeping Tom's warning in his mind, James finally approaches Edward in his dimly lit interrogation cell, where Edward is cuffed to the table. After observing Edward's odd behavior, James comes up with his introduction, but Edward already knows every single detail about him. This doesn't come as a shock to James since he considers himself renowned. Before starting the session, James bluntly accuses Edward of manipulating Fisher into committing suicide and replacing him with James, for reasons unknown. Edward doesn't confirm the accusation exactly, but does admit that he has chosen James to bring his story to light. Now the psychological evaluation begins with Edward making a huge claim about being possessed by a demon named Nefarious. He swears that Nefarious possessed him in his childhood, and ever since, he's been going against his will to commit the heinous crimes for which he shouldn't be held accountable. He further shares with James that the cops think he's fabricating the possession story to get out of prison. But in actuality, his family didn't get him baptized as a child and made him an open sanction for the lurking spirits. The demon in Edward also converses with James, revealing that he has Edward under his spell and the fact that Edward is in his last stage of possession out of the 5 stages. One by one, he sheds light on the 5 stages, according to which he tempts his targets first, obsesses over them next, infests them once they surrender, possesses them eventually, and then subjugates them. Ignoring all this, James wishes to know from Edward why he got Fisher to commit suicide when he was already declaring him an insane person in his evaluation and was preventing him from a death sentence. Edward, aka Nefarious, openly confesses that he wishes to get the death sentence because it is the only way to set himself free now that he's done with Edward's body. As they keep on going back and forth about the crimes Edward has committed, Nefarious predicts the murders of 3 people before James leaves the facility. James has a tough time putting up with Edward, so to end the superstition once and for all, he calls in an old priest. Edward first flips out to see the priest and doesn't wish to engage with him, but when the priest claims he doesn't believe in demons or possession, Nefarious takes advantage of the situation and scares him away.
Right up until what, Blue?
Right.
Will you be available until the sizzle? Blue!
When James returns to the table, Nefarious inclines James to let him possess his body and give proof of his existence. Despite not wanting to, James agrees to be possessed, but this story unfolds later. First, he diagnoses Edward with multiple personality disorder and thinks Nefarious is his alter ego. He asks Edward to show himself and confess to his crimes. Suddenly, there's a drastic shift in Edward's personality, who now whimpers and confesses he's innocent. He continues to share his concerns about James, revealing that Nefarious is plotting to kill him for not believing in him, for he did the same with Fisher. Things become challenging for James when Nefarious takes over Edward again and pulls the main trigger by accusing James of killing his mother to inherit her estate. Instead of interrogating Nefarious on how he knows such personal details about his life, James starts to justify himself by admitting that he legally euthanized his ill mother because she didn't have a chance of recovery. This goes to show that James has begun to give in to Nefarious temptations, which is the first stage of possession. Besides, Nefarious counts his mother's death as one of the 3 murders that he predicted earlier. James visibly grows agitated while trying to justify the fact that he isn't a murderer. Nefarious tells him to cut the act and join hands with him by writing a book about demons and hurting God's creation to get his attention. At first, James debates that it is morally corrupt to hurt God's creation, but soon loses his point and diagnoses him as an insane person. Soon, he signs the evaluation papers and decides to leave. On his way out, Nefarious asks him not to hinder his death sentence and take back his evaluation, but James ignores him. To get his attention, Nefarious speaks of a sinful act of James, revealing that he forced his girlfriend to abort their child because he wasn't ready to be a father. On top of that, he deliberately triggers James by calling out the irony of James hurting God's creation himself by aborting his unborn child. James, who was well composed as a psychiatrist at first, now breaks down and turns around in a state of absolute shock. Agitated, he tries to prove this as a justifiable action as well, but Nefarious makes a point about how people measure good and bad according to their own needs and wants. Of all the other things, he counts the death of the aborted baby as the second murder out of the 3 murders he had predicted earlier. To cloud James's judgment further, he tells him that his aborted child is being tossed around by the demons in the pits of hell. This unsettling thought brings out a more raw version of James as a person and not as a psychiatrist. He immediately gets out of Edward's cell and calls his girlfriend out of sheer guilt, but she doesn't take his call. Out of options, he calls the abortion clinic to cancel her abortion appointment, but unfortunately, the receptionist breaks it to him that the abortion has already been completed. In the meantime, a guard is appointed by Edward's side, since he's not allowed to be alone for a split second. Edward starts to cry and beg for mercy again, which perplexes the guard. On the other hand, Tom approaches James, who has gone silent by now. As he's indulged by his thoughts, Tom observes him and figures out that Edward has gotten into his head and has messed with his judgment already. He still reminds James that he has only an hour left to submit Edward's psychological evaluation so the prison can process whether to execute him or not. James calms his nerves and finally confronts Edward with an open mind. He asks how he knows such personal details about his life. Nefarious speaks on Edward's behalf, admitting that he's chosen James as his next target. Hence, he's been on his radar for a long time. Soon, their subject changes to the good and evil in society. Nefarious debates that evil exists within us. Only some suppress it and some let it take over them. James also refutes his argument by counting the good deeds of being in a civilized and free society. Nefarious drops down a whole new perspective on slavery by revealing that there are millions of demons out there who are possessing innocent people and doing horrible things at the command of Satan. Being one of those demons, he asks James to submit to Satan and write the book about the evils of society. He states that the book would mark the beginning of the evil, which will soon take over society and destroy humankind to piss off God. James doesn't take this seriously and laughs it off, but Nefarious drops another bomb to mess with his head by claiming that James has already written such a book. James becomes disturbed and falsifies his claims. Amidst their argument, James is called back outside by Tom, who takes him to Edward's original cell. He shows him Edward's recent journal, in which he has jotted down every single detail of Edward's life, from his childhood up till now. Before he can process how Edward had all this information, he finds the Dark Gospel alongside the journal, which is an anti-Bible. In a shocking turn of events, the author of the Dark Gospel turns out to be none other than James. Tom brings to James' attention that Edward always keeps a journal of the victims he targets and kills, so he must make his next move with caution. James musters the courage and returns to the interrogation room with the journal. He shows it to Edward and demands to know the source that helped him gather such intimate details of his life. He smirks while revealing that he has always been by James's side, which is how he knows everything about him. James gets triggered and lashes out at him, during which Edward breaks one of his wrists to break free from the cuffs. He then immediately attacks James and strangles him with the metal chains. He asks James to beg for his life if he wants to live. After struggling, James finally begs and gets spared. The guards take over and take Edward away, during which James declares him a sane person and issues his death sentence, which is what Nefarious wanted in the first place to set himself free. He counts Edward's death as the 3rd murder, which he had predicted earlier. Soon, James joins Tom to watch Edward's execution, which is death by electric chair. We are shown Edward in the next scene, whose hair is getting trimmed for the electric shock to hit his brain better. He cries for mercy before the execution and keeps stating that he's innocent, but nobody listens to him. Even when the guards strap him to the electric chair, he asks James in the audience to prove his innocence. But James doesn't. Suddenly, Nefarious takes over him for a while and asks James if he's willing to take their offer to write the Dark Gospel. James ignores him like he's done it before and enjoys the execution along with the audience. As soon as Edward dies a tormenting death, Nefarious is set free. The first thing he does is possess James's body and make him shoot himself, because he's aware of his evil plans and might hinder them later. The God's miracle takes place when the possessed shoots himself in the face 3 times, but the rounds turn out to be empty every time. The guards spot him and immediately overpower him. The scenes then cut to a year after the devastating event. James appears on a live show to promote his book, which is the contrary of what Nefarious had asked of him. It exposes the evil and how to battle it with the power of God. James also opens up about his personal experience with the evil that changed his life and inspired him to speak up against it. He also speaks up about the miracle, which has led him to believe that he was personally protected by God because he has a purpose to serve. After doing well on the show, James heads out. As he's repenting for his sins, he tries to pay a homeless woman. He becomes haunted when the woman speaks in Nefarious's voice, asking him if he's missed him. As the battle between good and evil continues, the film ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome recaps.